Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Konetsky. Thank you for joining today's podcast series and LinkedIn Live series. I have joining me today Jen Cords, who is my colleague and partner here at the NOR Group. And just as a reminder, you are joining the LinkedIn Live of Product Growth. This is a new series where we really talk about the fundamentals of product marketing and how, when done well, they help grow a business. They help accelerate growth. I'd like to remind you before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. We are recording today. We are broadcast on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, Twitter, as well as any podcast platform that you engage with. And we are live every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central. Please come join us. And we look forward to you engaging either during or after the event. So as we really get started here, Jen, before we kick into the meat of the conversation, can you give a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Michelle. So I am Jen Cords. I run the revenue operations practice here at the NOR Group. I've been doing revenue operations, marketing operations type work for the last 15 years or so. I'm currently based in Atlanta, but originally from the Pacific Northwest. And just the synergies that revenue operations and product marketing can have is kind of why we're here today and what sort of we're going to dive into in our conversation.
Great, thank you. And on that note, just as a reminder, today's title is really all about the CMO dilemma. One of them, they have plenty of them, but the CMO dilemma of really, do you focus on product marketing or RevOps? And when you think about it, CMOs are plagued with limited budgets, limited resources. And so the big question is, how should CMOs really focus time and energy of their teams, prioritize budgets so that they're optimizing for growth? So I really look forward to this discussion, Jen, as we really think about the pros and cons of product marketing and RevOps. Now, as we get started, like I said, we're talking about product marketing fundamentals. One of the most fundamental products is a person, ourselves. When you think about it, everybody works for a company. We work for the NOR Group. Our NOR Group, we have a brand, we have a narrative, but individuals also can have a brand and a narrative. So just as we get started here, tell me about, maybe just very briefly, what do you consider your individual brand? And how do you use that to really build relationships and grow business, help companies grow their business even?
Yeah, so my brand ties very much to my childhood. I grew up as a third culture kid, so I grew up internationally, and I didn't actually start living here in the States until university. And so Gypsy has always been very closely associated to me and what I do. And I have it tied into my fishing, tied into sort of just who I am and what I do. And professionally, I've always worked remotely before remote work really was a thing. And so I've found opportunities to work in an asynchronous environment and to create ways to do business without actually having to show up in person. And so I make the joke all the time, if I have internet, I can work, and have internet will travel. And so I do. I travel quite frequently with my dog, with my son, all over the world while still maintaining work. So I'm not actually having to take vacation time to go do and have a life outside of work. So I've very much blended my work and life together in a very cohesive and sort of seamless fashion.
So really just simplifying that, thinking about global traveler, effective and efficient.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. And honestly, those are three very core principles that align closely to product marketing. Global, many companies that we work with are global, being able to do business across different time zones, thinking about different cultures and needs. Effective, everybody wants to have effective processes, tools, and technology, but then also efficiency, getting stuff done and really bringing all of that together. So see, you do have a personal brand that you can almost pull product marketing into many different areas. So on that note, let's talk a little bit. Let's start shifting our conversation really into the topic of today, really around how CMOs have this really big problem and challenge of balancing budgets and timeframes and employees and skill sets and the needs of the business all to grow fast. And oftentimes they are under extreme pressure to grow the business very, very quickly. So I want to talk about just really two core initiatives that we feel like are in their toolkit and are in our wheelhouse: product marketing and RevOps. So as we get started, Jen, how would you describe in its most simplistic form the definition of RevOps? What is it? Why is it?
So revenue operations at its fundamental level is really a movement within the operations space and within the business space of unifying your people, processes, and technologies. Many companies, when they're first set up, have a marketing team, a sales team, customer success team, and they all manage their own tools independently. But as businesses have evolved and the speed of business has evolved, having all of those teams work cohesively together is really where RevOps comes from. So it is every function that contributes to driving revenue. Those operational people work in concert with each other, either on the same team or they work so closely together that they have shared common goals and KPIs.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, do you feel like it's really fundamentally a strategic effort or an operational effort?
In early stage companies, I would say it's probably more looked at as an operational function. Think of it like HR or the legal. Like you have to have an operations person. Well, in ideal situation, you have to have an operations person to work because they're the ones that are going to be managing and maintaining the security and the data within your systems. As businesses evolve, it's really a strategic function. Having operations people in those conversations early and often help you achieve your outcomes that you're after a lot faster than if, for example, product marketing goes and creates a solution and a whole campaign off on their own and then hands it to ops and says, implement this. There may be constraints or limitations or things that the product marketing team didn't know we had that function or capability to do that could enhance and improve their plan. And so by working in silos, you're limiting the business. Whereas if you have ops involved in a lot of those conversations early, you're able to be very strategic in how you implement and effectively market and then track whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, and that made me think through. I was just about to ask you about some of the misperceptions around RevOps, but it sounds like one of the things that you're highlighting is that it's just a function that operates in a silo. In reality, it really should be operating across the entire organizational structure. And we're going to really dig in and focus on where and how it can work with product marketing.
Yes. The best way to look at ops, just any ops, especially revenue ops, is a partner. And they are agnostic to anyone. Like they should not necessarily report up to a CMO or a CRO or whomever, because then they're tied to those specific goals. But if they work independently and across the entire organization, they're able to support everyone more seamlessly and can contribute in a data-driven manner to the overall goals of the business. So yeah, partnering with product marketing because they're the conduit to engineering. And so tracking what's happening for SaaS businesses, what's happening within a product, and then marrying that to the sales data and then seeing how the changes and the new features and functionalities all resonate really can be impactful. And to your point earlier, it can help you elevate exponentially and move even faster.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. In fact, I really call that the customer product connection. And a lot of that really starts with product marketing. And it's that connection into product, into the technologist, into engineering, taking when I say product, it's hardware, software, services, solutions, whatever, all of it, some of it, and really defining what that narrative and that differentiated message is that will resonate with customers and target customers, so that when we are working with you guys in RevOps, it's more of a like you said, a handoff, not quite a handoff, but a handshake between the two, less of a handoff.
Yes. And so, Michelle, like just for our audience, and so we can have common understanding, like what would you say in its most simplistic form is the definition of like product marketing?
Yeah. Well, it's really about the optimization of how you are creating that customer and product connection. And do you have the right product? Is it defined well enough? Is it solving customer needs in a way that is unique and differentiated, gives sustainable differentiation, but then allows customers to want to buy it and then become evangelists? And so it truly does boil down to a customer product connection. Yes, you need to look at competition and trends and what analysts are doing and build a strategy. But then there's messaging and positioning and then tactical operational pieces. But it fundamentally comes down to how well are you aligning your product with customer needs and educating them about what you are doing, that customer product connection.
That makes sense. Well, and that customer product connection also is really helpful for sales because then they can personalize that outreach and help accelerate those conversations. So maybe shortens the sales cycle when you have good product messaging and frameworks and the like.
Yeah, and I think we'll explore that here in a few minutes. It's almost that being the core and the start of having, and we mentioned early on in the show, effective and efficient. And that rings true across the entire customer journey.
Nice.
Which now let's talk about that for a minute. The customer lifecycle journey and maturity model. And what we have found here at the NOR Group is that in engaging with many customers, even though there are separate functions of product marketing, RevOps, and then other marketing capabilities, our customers are really landing on kind of a life cycle, a maturity model. In fact, I'm going to pull up an image of this for everyone here joining us via video. Give me 1 second here. And I will describe this for folks that are potentially joining us via audio only. So what we are sharing and going to talk through for a few minutes is the customer lifecycle journey maturity model. And imagine an infinity curve with distinct stages across this curve: awareness, engagement, evaluation, and purchase. And then you flip to the other side and think about adoption, impact, and evangelize. And so we really see this with all of our customers of how each of them operate or maybe do better in different stages, especially across product marketing and RevOps. So Jen, as you've been working with customers in RevOps, where are you finding the majority of pain points or challenges that your clients are really dealing with?
I think of the challenges that they're seeing, it kind of depends on what stage of company they're in. So one of our clients, they're very much in the awareness engagement phase, like is where they're struggling. They have a fantastic product. Once they get in front of people, the closing, the sales cycle is really short and like the adoption is high, but getting people just to the website to understand kind of what they do and then engaging with their content is where they're seeing the most struggle. Another one of our clients, it's more on the impact side. They've got great awareness, engagement. Again, the sales cycle is pretty seamless, but then it's driving the impact, getting the stickiness that most companies are after. And so I think it really depends. And I know Nor, our other business partner, he's actually presented this infinity life cycle to some of his strategy visualization clients. And he runs a exercise where they have sticky notes and they'll put sticky notes on the various stages of where they feel they're strong versus weak. And it's interesting that people from different departments actually are aligned on, oh, we're weak here, we're strong here, without ever talking to each other, like not seeing this, not being coached into giving a specific answer. So it's interesting that even disparate departments have a pretty good pulse on what's working and what's not. But to ask you, like, where are you seeing a lot of people struggling with this from a product marketing perspective?
As companies, and I'm going to align with you and say, yes, I think it absolutely depends on the maturity of a company. Are they early stage, high growth? Are they post IPO? It just, part of it depends. But what is very common often is that there's always room for improvement, whether they are starting from ground zero or if they are in business for many years and they have a very complex portfolio and they need to start optimizing the portfolio, you still have problems. So it's not a one and done kind of thing. But where I see the bulk of the issues that are really lending to kind of product marketing wheelhouse areas are almost on the left hand side. And so things around awareness, engagement, evaluation, and purchasing. Fundamentally, where and how, like, do you have a portfolio that is optimized? Are all of the products generating revenue? Do they have differentiation? What is that value prop and message? So really looking at, and sometimes going back to basics of portfolio pruning and messaging and positioning. Are they all optimized to really gain speed as and growth as companies continue to grow? I like to say that oftentimes what I've seen is that companies will focus just on growth at all costs. And if you're not building the foundation, you're almost creating a house of cards. It's going to fall. It's not going to create that scalable growth that is going to be required as they continue to build and grow. And so it's do things right, build the foundation, but focus on that left side. And then I see the right side as being the enablers to allow another wrap around the loop, another lap around the loop, and get faster and better every single time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Especially when you mentioned building a house of cards. A lot of people, a lot of companies, not people necessarily, they're trying to grow so quickly. And you see that a lot. And also tech stack, just there's a tool for everything. And then nobody really knows what any of them do, or are they connected or whatnot. And it again creates this digital duct tape, as I put it, that you have to refactor some of these systems to move forward. You're releasing a new product or feature or functionality. Well, you don't have the tracking capable to do that. Okay, well, let me go refactor this tool to then be able to move forward. So it's 2 steps back, one step forward every single time. And that creates kind of a stilted growth of a company. And so, yeah, to your point, if you have good messaging framework, all of that, and having that foundation right, either in product marketing or in RevOps or whatever department, like having that solid foundation allows you to just move that much quicker.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned whether or not there's one tool. And I think we're lucky if our clients have one tool for one thing. I think what we often see is multiple tools, like especially in startup companies and high growth companies, the purchasing options are distributed often, and you end up with multiple tools that do the same thing or something very similar. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a data nightmare, I can imagine from your side, of where and how, what is our single source of truth? How are we going to populate that or share that information and make sure that we have clean data? Because from the product marketing side, we need clean data so we know how the portfolio is growing, what's moving, what's not, where we need to make modifications and changes. And if you don't have data that you can trust, therein lies a giant problem.
Yeah, trustworthy data is a problem for everyone. And data, in my mind, is really everybody's responsibility. Like if you have access to a system, if you see somebody's name is misspelled or like all caps versus properly cased, like just fix it. Like little tweaks like that help clean a database. If you do 5 a day, like that's 5 more that are cleaner than they were yesterday. And it may not seem like a lot when you have like a 1 million person database, but it really does help. So yeah, data from in all respects is really important, and clean data and trustworthy data, to your point, is important when making decisions on what to create, what not to create, what features and functionalities to build, where to spend our time and resources. So,
I mean, I feel like it's so important that it becomes the universal language
yes,
between marketing and sales and customer experience and even into product. So being that pivot point between product and marketing and customer, product marketing that is, it's the reliance on data. It's so critical. It is that single language.
it is.
Yeah. And so you mentioned we run this exercise with customers about looking at this maturity model and different organizations or functional areas coming in and thinking about what works well, maybe where they have some gaps and how there's some alignment. Um, and so, from a stage perspective, I think people are very able to look at where the opportunities might be. Let's drill in just maybe a level deeper, Jen, and really think about now just focusing a little bit more tightly on RevOps and product marketing and maybe some of the key efforts or activities that may cross over both within different stages. What we'll find is that there's no one thing, no one effort, or even one functional area that's so tied to one stage, but you'll see they transcend everything. But what, tell me maybe as we start thinking about individual efforts, is there one area that you think could be approached and really help accelerate growth for companies if they look at it through the lens of RevOps and product marketing?
Probably the area that I think most companies could find alignment and the most benefit from aligning product marketing and RevOps would be the customer profile and targeting that then comes from those customer profiles. Because data is used in a lot of that. It's important to have clean data for one, and two, have data that you can trust, and building out the robust profiles of firmographic data as well as behavioral data, and then tying them all together. And so what RevOps does is enrich and create those profiles, but then product marketing can take those profiles and find the similarities between them, find an anomaly perhaps, but they kind of just take that and they can see the trends within all of that data that RevOps is then tracking or creating through the enrichment solutions that they have.
Yeah, I definitely see it as kind of that partnership of RevOps bringing the data and then having product marketing kind of be that lead engine to start looking through the data, but pull in other partners throughout the organization, sellers, start looking at win loss. Why are we winning? Why are we losing? Where and how? Getting really analytical about that and pulling it in. So we're not just looking at pure data, but pulling in the win loss, customer satisfaction, talking to customers, bringing that in, even services. I found that partnering and aligning with the services organization who often take the front call, first line defense with customers. What's going on there? What are you hearing? Being able to bring that in. But the one piece that I think is sometimes overlooked, which to me takes it from a customer profile to what really is the spirit of ideal customer profile, is pulling in the product lens, thinking about the customer and the environment maturity, so that you can look at not only the rear view mirror of where have we lost, why have we lost, or where do we win and why, but it's also how does that align to where we are with our product maturity? How about the customer maturity? Are those two aligned such that we are targeting the right customers? And if you don't really focus on that exercise and people just jump that and go straight into, well, we know we want to target CISOs and CISOs in medium and large companies. Okay, that's great. But if your product isn't serving their needs right now, then you have a disconnect.
Well, and is that they may need to be an internal champion. Like, yes, eventually a CISO could need to sign off on it, but really, is that your target audience that'll be using your tool on a day-to-day basis? So should your messaging really just be targeted at those people, or should you have multiple levels of messaging to both educate the CISO, so when his team comes and his or her team comes and says we want X tool, they have some awareness, but really driving home to the managers or the VPs or that level of person that's going to be in it day to day, making sure that they understand it and they fall in love with it and they go and become your internal advocate to the person who writes the check really comes down to targeting and making sure that you've got that full feedback loop. And as you're adding the product lens, providing that information back to like your ops team to then change the targeting for your demand gen ads or your PPC or even your scoring model, like all of those things come down to sharing information between product marketing and RevOps to make sure the people marketing is handing over to sales are the people that they really should be talking to. And that knowledge and information really does come from product marketing.
Yeah. And I have a perspective here, but I want to get your thoughts. How well do you think that actually works in most of the organizations that you're specifically talking to?
I'd say it's hit or miss. If I'm being generous, I'd say it's hit or miss for sure. Just because many times companies will approach their ICP and their targeting and personas as a set it and forget it, which it really can't be. You need to evaluate it, not necessarily on a monthly basis, because then you're going to be constantly changing where you're going, but at least evaluating it on a quarterly basis and making small adjustments will get you closer to your goal. And early stage companies, I'm sure you've seen it too, they don't know what they don't know. And so they're just they're making their best guess. And so they're drawing lines in the sand. And so that one does require a little bit of refinement more quickly on a shorter life cycle. But yeah, I'd say it's hit or miss. And a lot of times product marketing will create those personas and profiles for competitive intelligence and battle cards and things like that. But none of that information ever makes it back to an ops team to then operationalize it, to tweak the scoring model, to make sure that the targeting is correct. And so they're still throwing everything over the proverbial fence. And then sales is like, well, half of this isn't any good because it doesn't match what product marketing has said that we're supposed to be talking to. So it creates that friction and that misalignment.
Yeah. And I would even, I would even take it one step further and say that product marketing often will do this at launch. As you think about a product life cycle and you're in planning, and when everybody really stops and analyzes what is the value prop, what is our message, start looking at the target personas, ICPs, they do it once and then forget about it, like just like you said, and then it's the throw it over the fence. But the core message here is that it's so critical, just as you need to continually look at the productivity of your portfolio, it's really clicking in and looking at the effectiveness of things like positioning, like ideal customer profile.
Well, what would you say, Michelle, happens in most of these companies that we work with when they don't place enough time or effort to creating their tight and compelling narratives? Like,
yeah, because I feel like a lot of times people are so biased for action. It is just continue to do fast. And it's almost like a ready, fire, aim. Now, I'm not saying that people need to stop and think about and build a strategy in an ivory tower by any stretch. But really, it needs to be a little bit of a give and take of quickly check something and then go execute, or at least have a plan with some assumptions built in that you can go test and execute and then continue to innovate and improve as you go forward. Because if what I see happening is that people tend to, and again, it's not people, it's companies often fall into the, well, how can we hit this quarter's numbers? What is the most tactical and operational thing that we can do? And that's a very short game. But in reality, you almost have to think about the long game. Do you have the right messaging? Do you have the right content? Even getting down into, are you targeting the right people? Do you have plans for talking to analysts? Do you know the trends that could impact you? And sometimes there's not that continuous alignment and check. And so if you focus on the execution, then you get too far down and things are broken and you're not hitting your revenue numbers and your growth numbers. then you have to come back and then redo things. And so it really needs to be this partnership. And I think what we're articulating here is it's a partnership between product marketing and RevOps with strategies and plans and tactical execution and operational behaviors that work together in tandem.
Yes. And but also that feedback loop, like
absolutely
taking that in is really important. And some of that does come from, like you said, the sales side, close lost reasons, close won reasons, whatnot, and making sure that product marketing sees those, as well as feature requests or whatever, making sure product marketing also sees them and can take them to engineering. Like there's lots of symbiotic relational type things between product marketing and RevOps.
Right. And that, I think the voice of the customer is one additional area that is important. So we've talked about a little bit about the ideal customer. We've talked about even messaging and having the right message and narrative, whether it's at the product level, but sometimes it's at the company level and having that. But voice of customer, it cannot be overstated that is really critical. And it's one of the core functions of product marketing is really, one, better understand the customer, but two, be able to drive customer relationships such that they want to evangelize for you, but feeding into and throughout the rest of the organization. And it's this entire life cycle journey maturity model. Each of these stages really does have multifunctional areas kind of operating within each of those stages. And it's really critical there.
Yes.
So Jen, do you have an example of where product marketing, when done well, has really helped RevOps? Or paint a picture for what that looks like. What would your ideal situation be?
Yeah. So at a company that I worked for several years ago, when we started doing integrated campaigns, and these were, so the company was a SaaS company. It was a high growth SaaS company. And they were doing targeted campaigns against their competitors. Obviously, you don't want to just call out the competitor. You don't want to do it based off like a feature bake out, because that never wins. You need to provide better value to the customer and have the customer also see, or your prospect see, why in the long term you're a better buy. Because when you're a SaaS company, it's like keeping up with the Joneses. Somebody releases a feature, the other company or the competitor, they're going to release a similar feature next month or whatever. Like there's very little differentiation, but it's the value, it's the experience, it's the customer usage and the stickiness of how easy can you make this for your customer that really differentiates it. So back to the point, the company that I was doing work for, we were doing integrated campaigns targeted at our customers or at our competitors. And we really leveraged the knowledge that product marketing had, both with the analysts as well as just their industry relationships, and then the customer advisory board that they had created, to find out, well, why did they choose us over the competitor? Because we had in our notes that they were evaluating the other companies. Well, why did they choose us? And some of that was that just came out of conversations. It wasn't like one function, one element that they chose us over them. But though that insight really helped form how and where to engage with the people that we wanted to engage with. And so building out this framework of these integrated campaigns, it allowed us to have multiple tiers of messaging. It allowed us to have tons of assets that were all tagged based off of awareness, engagement, commitment, that level of like where they are in their journey. But then it also came all the way down to the battle cards for sales on, if this person came in from this user journey, here's the best information that you can use. And here's a case study and a source paper and all of that. Like all of that foundational work in the background of, here's the assets and here's how they plug in and the big puzzle. A lot of that came from product marketing. And so then we took all of those pieces and fit it together in the best way operationally. So then it was seamless, and we could look at the various stages of this journey and then have data to report back on. Okay, well, a lot of people are watching this demo video, but then they're falling off when they see this white paper.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch that out and do something else. And so by knowing the outcome that we were all after, it was more easy for the RevOps team to then create the reports that could then inform how we needed to make future tweaks. So having that relationship and where it could be a give and a take was really important. And we launched one, and then it became an evergreen campaign. And then about 6 months later, we launched a second one, and they drove a couple $1 million worth of revenue, all because of the pre-planning and the integration and just the overall thoughtfulness of the entire experience.
Right.
So yeah, when done well, you can drive significant revenue.
That is highly efficient and optimized.
Yes.
And just using this particular example, it's being able to deliver the type of content that you need so that you can plug it in effectively throughout the entire journey to pull people through the sales cycle. But in order to do that, it's really having a tight understanding of what is the differentiated value prop and what is that message that you really want to cascade throughout all that content. Because you could just create content for the sake of content, but if you don't have that underlying strategic message and message framework, then I just feel like you're throwing spaghetti on a wall and and then we find out from you later that, well, this particular one pager or this blog or this white paper didn't resonate. And like you said, people are falling off a cliff. They stop, they eject and fall out.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good either. And so it's spending a little bit of time on the front end, making sure that you have that plan before you really go into execution.
Well, and to your point earlier, it's not go plan something in an ivory tower and spend forever and ever planning it. It's let's create the minimal viable product, like the smallest iteration of this thing, and launch it, but have a roadmap, if you will, to build on it and grow it and go from there. Like, because making those small changes along the way will actually accelerate your destination, like where you end up, better than if you plan, because then you're more on a linear path. So small iterations kind of give you a hockey stick versus plan and launch. That's very linear. So related to, I mean, I gave you the ideal RevOps side of how it all would work. Like, where have you seen product marketing and RevOps, like the problems that can occur when they are disjointed?
I think in my ideal world, it is one where I'm not the right data. I was about to say infinite data, but infinite data does us no good. But it's the right data that is accurate and trusted, so that we, as in product marketing, that as we build out launch plans and content and messaging frameworks and strategy and better understand the customer needs and what's happening with trends and competitors, that's all great. But if we don't have data, what I have found is that organizations start infighting and finger pointing. I shouldn't say infighting, but finger pointing between, well, who's right? Who actually owns the lead? Is it actually even moving through the sales cycle? And who gets credit? And at the end of the day, it's less about who gets credit. It's more about, did we close the sale? Is it closed won, closed loss? What is it? And for my perfect world, it is being able to trust that data. And if without that, a lot of really negative consequences happen throughout the organization. Everything that is from slowdown to organizational questioning to alignment, it's just ineffective and inefficient. And in fact, we started this conversation with effective and efficient. And I think that those are two really key principles, and data is at the core. So having product marketing and RevOps tightly aligned around data is super important in my book.
I would agree. And I mean, and to your point, the infinite data, you can't track everything. And there's that old adage of, if you track everything, you're really tracking nothing. And so using the example of like the integrated campaigns, like know what you're wanting your outcome to be. Define what success would look like, and then track data against it. You want number of meetings booked, great. If you want number of video demo views or whatever, like define what it is and then make sure there's a mechanism to track it. And if you're not getting what you're looking for, make sure you're able to track, like, how did they get there? How are we driving there? Like, and those things matter. And maybe it is the messaging and leveraging your product marketing team to do A/B testing and like to try different messages and then know what works. Really, really is helpful. And to our point throughout this entire thing, having trustworthy data is really critical to all the decisions that any organization is making. And so at its core, if you're not maintaining a clean database or having a strategy to do that, you're really hindering any forward progress that you may have.
Yeah. And so I think as we started this conversation is really, CMOs have this really tough battle in front of them: limited budgets, limited resources, time, people, skill sets, and really a lot of options of what do they focus on. And I think that what we're highlighting is that there really has to be a tight collaboration between product marketing and RevOps. And what I have found, and we mentioned it earlier on, is as we think about this life cycle journey maturity model, one of the very first steps is really to sit down and think about where you are, how strong are you in each of these areas. And Jen, you mentioned the sticky note exercise, really thinking through, okay, what's working well and what's not working well, and ask people within your organization and even your functional area, but then also across the organization. And that will start giving you insights on where and how you might want to focus your efforts. But just know that they're not siloed. And being able to have that honest assessment of where you are strong and where you might need some help. Because as we were talking, Jen, it's the collaboration between some of it might be a little bit of strategy and planning, and some of it might be execution and operational aspects, but working together really around getting the data and moving the customer through the life cycle journey. I think that's the important criticality here.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not, to your point, it's not silos. They're handoffs. Like, it's like running a relay race. Each function, wherever on this journey that they're responsible for that area, they need to have a clear handoff to the next person, because you don't want to drop the baton. And so having that clear and concise messaging, having all the systems connected from a RevOps perspective, like having that cohesion and that give and that take with the feedback loops and the integrated approach really is important just for everybody's sort of long-term success.
So let me ask you a question as we get close to wrapping up here. If product marketing is a chicken and RevOps is an egg, which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
I think that is a dilemma that nobody's ever going to have an answer to.
Exactly.
I mean, we need all of them. So give me all the chickens and give me all the eggs, and we'll make some omelets.
Exactly. The power of collaboration and teamwork that I think really helps optimize growth for companies. And it's very unique and different for every single company. And so again, in kind of wrapping this up as we get ready to close here, just want to reiterate the recommendation for companies is to really assess where you are, where you have strengths, use those, but then have a really honest assessment of where you have gaps and how can those gaps best be fulfilled. If you're operating with really bad data, that's going to serve nobody. If you're operating with mismatched messaging that's in website and content and coming out of sellers' mouths that is not consistent, that's not going to serve you either. So really, really look at where the gaps are. Jen, any final thoughts that you would like to echo before we wrap here?
I would just say, I mean, as much as businesses think that they have the fundamentals down, really taking the time to like reevaluate, do you actually have the fundamentals down? And just ask those very core questions. Where's our data coming from? Can we trust this data? How many sources of data do we have? What is our messaging? Listen to what your sellers are saying. Listen to what your customers are saying. And if those aren't all in alignment, it's time to revisit your messaging framework or revisit your operational practices and strategies. So I would say look at your fundamentals, and if you've got them solid, great. Keep on going, keep on innovating. But if you don't and you've got some questions, dig in and you'll be surprised at what you can see.
Yeah, well said. Jen, thank you so much for your time here today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And as a reminder, everyone reach out, engage with us. We have a NOR forum, norgroup.com/forum. We're broadcast on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So engage with us, and we look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you.